A young couple, Jeff and Stacy, arrived at the local cemetery to change the flowers of their deceased 7-year-old daughter, who was murdered several years ago. The killer was never found, but the couple seemed to have made their peace with it. Placing the flowers on the tombstone, Stacy smiled as she began talking about the time they spent together, all the fun and adventures they had. After a few more words, she couldn't hold her tears anymore and requested they go back home. But shortly before exiting the cemetery, Stacy heard the voice of her dead daughter. In shock, she stopped walking and looked in the direction the voice came from, but all she saw was a little girl sitting under a tree at the edge of the cemetery. Out of curiosity, she started walking towards the little girl, but she was stopped halfway through by her husband. He grabbed her hands calmly and insisted that she was just emotional and it was normal that she hears things. But just before they could turn back and leave, the voice of their daughter called out again, but this time they both heard it. Out of grief, they turned in the same direction the voice came from and saw the little girl, this time on her feet. She screamed and cried in the voice of their dead daughter, to the despair of Jeff and Stacy, who had to relive the final moments they had with their daughter in her hospital bed. 10 minutes after, Stacy grabbed her purse and started beating the little girl with it as a means to, in her words, silence the little witch causing them so much pain. But Jeff intervened just in time before calling the police and explaining to them what had happened. The call was directed to the SCP Foundation, and 5 minutes later, the personnel arrived at the scene. Both Jeff and Stacy were treated with Class A anesthetic, and the little was taken into SCP custody. The little girl in this event is regarded as SCP-2118, or the Lost Child as she was initially called. Although her anomalous abilities can be traumatized for the people involved, she still doesn't seem to pose any threat to humanity in general, which is why she was given the safe class. SCP-2118 is currently held in standard humanoid containment cell under 24/7 observation by motion-activated security cameras. The holding cell is furnished with everything a girl of her age would require, which also includes 2 stuffed animals, an elephant, and a whale. SCP-2118 is also given the permission to go in an outdoor enclosure once for about 1 hour between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. She must at all times be accompanied by at least one attendant. It is important, however, that the said attendant must be a person who has never had children before, and the individual must also be versed in American Sign Language, translation, and usage. No other personnel is allowed to have any verbal access with the subject unless in an approved testing log. SCP-2118 is a young human female, presumed 9 years old. She has orange hair and gray eyes, with a scar in the shape of an open parentheses apparently 9 centimeters long, located on her right cheek. The subject claimed the scar came from a stranger hitting her in the face years ago, but when asked further on the identity of the stranger or what she was hit with, the subject refused to answer these questions. She communicates generally through American Sign Language and, in some occasions, through writing, despite being able to speak properly. On the outside, SCP-2118 looks like a normal little girl. However, her anomalous abilities begin to manifest whenever she comes in contact with a person or a parent whose child died at a point in time. After exposure, SCP-2118 begins to speak in a voice, which is wildly similar to the deceased child during the time of death. This ability and the children she mimics are both referred to as SCP-2118-01. The deceased children are generally below the legal ages of 18, at least according to the records by the Foundation. And oddly enough, all SCP-2118-01 records spoke in the same words used by the deceased children before their deaths. In some cases, SCP-2118-01 just mimics choking, drowning, asphyxiation sounds, and even the formation of blisters in the throat cavity. How she's able to do this still remains a mystery to the Foundation. Perhaps one of the weirder features of SCP-2118 is her ability to look remorseful while she makes these sounds, especially considering how violent the nature of the child's death was. Apparently, she maintains a look of contortion because she's unaware of how much psychological distress her ability might cause the person or parent. On some occasions, she shows some signs of apology and platitude to the parent involved, all the while still speaking. I don't know about you, but I personally don't think she's actually remorseful to these people. but that's something for later. After her initial capture, the Foundation immediately set up an interview with the subject. The task was carried out by Doctors Lavoie and Wu, while Dr. Danvers was the translator. At first, the subject behaved hostile to the interviewers, even insisting they stop calling her SCP-2118 and claiming her real name was Cheryl. But after a while, she was apologetic, pointing out that she's aware of how terrible people feel when she speaks. She even insisted that they glue her mouth together, but that offer was turned down by the doctors. According to SCP-2118 claims, the subject's inability to control her powers always made her mother angry and sad, especially when she mimicked and cried like her mother's dead baby. This drove the woman into a deep depression before she eventually died from cardiac arrest. SCP-2118 was later interviewed again, this time using a D-Class employee labeled D-3498, a 27-year-old Caucasian male who was convicted for the second-degree murder of both his wife and 3-year-old daughter. On seeing the man, SCP-2118 first apologizes to him before screaming in a high-pitched tone which abruptly resembles that of SCP-2118-01. The high-pitched scream lasted for 5 seconds before the subject started speaking. She constantly altered the words "Daddy" and "Help me" in D-3498's deceased daughter's voice, all the while apologizing to the man in American Sign Language. The D-Class employee obviously looked distressed from what he was seeing. Out of anger, he attempted to break his restraints to silence SCP-2118 shortly before 2 Foundation agents were called in to apprehend D-3498. The original interview ended there, but the log continued. Records show that the female Foundation personnel sent to apprehend D-3498 lost her son 8 years ago. Unfortunately for her, SCP-2118 immediately changed the voice of her deceased son, but this time, the signs translated didn't seem apologetic, but rather questioning the agent and otherwise mocking her for letting her son die. This wasn't the only time SCP-2118 exhibited this kind of behavior. Other incidents were recorded via the motion-censored camera. It is an unsanctioned interview between SCP-2118 and an SCP researcher called Anselman. The records show Anselman initially watching the subject as she sleeps, shortly before waking her up by knocks he made on the glass of her holding cell. Through sign language, she asked him what he was doing in her cell. But before he could answer the question, the subject began to tremble in a way that indicates SCP-2118-01 was on its way. After trembling for approximately 96 seconds, the subject took the voice of a prepubescent male, calling out to his father. Anselman was delighted by this occurrence. The joy on his face to once again speak with his deceased son seemed very obvious, but his joy was short-lived. See, Anselman's initial theory on SCP-2118 was that she was the gateway to speak with a deceased child, kind of like the mediums we refer to in modern times as psychic. As the subject spoke in the voice of his son, he tried having a conversation with him, claiming that he was manifesting through SCP-2118. The subject, however, didn't like the assumption, and she made the point clear by asking Anselman a series of random questions, which basically taunts both the living and the dead, before giving a series of sign language, which translates to, "Did you think you could really talk to him?" Then another which translates, "He's dead. They're all dead. I can't be him for you. I can't be anyone." The log ends with Dr. Wu escorting Anselman out of the cell with SCP-2118 staring at them as they leave. Apparently, Anselman was treated with Class A anesthetic and assigned to a different Foundation site. Dr. Wu also made sure that all the records of the encounter were stored securely in private Foundation archives. I only managed to get a hold of this log thanks to my inside source. At least I didn't think much about this particular log, but then I recalled SCP-2118's first log on her abilities and how she claims that she is not in control of her abilities. I personally find that to be false, which brings us back to my initial assumption on the fact that SCP-2118 isn't at all remorseful for the pains she causes others. As a matter of fact, I believe she finds joy and entertainment in seeing others suffer, at least as she exhibited in her encounter with the female Foundation agent. Another conclusion I can draw from these logs is the probability that she is in fact in control of her abilities, especially considering the questions she asked Anselman using his son's voice. Although I do believe both of my assumptions on SCP-2118 are correct, I do still have a question on how she got such an ability in the first place. Could the stranger have been an SCP subject capable of passing or creating abilities in normal humans? Or could it just be that the said stranger was actually a scientist who conducts experiments on little children, as was the case of Mr. Green, the apparent creator of SCP-040, aka Evolution's Child, and Dr. Vastabrook, the creator of SCP-191, the Cyborg Girl? Although I haven't got a clear conclusion on how SCP-2118 got her powers, I am, however, certain that the mysterious stranger has something to do with it. I may be wrong, so I'll let you decide. Did the mysterious stranger have something to do with the lost child's anomalous abilities? If so, how did he do it? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. Like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in the next one. What do you have for me? Wow, that's a big one. Okay, I'll meet up with you soon.